The United States will not change its position on the current restrictions on Ukrainian army attacks deep into Russian territory amid the latest strikes by Russian military forces, White House Strategic Communications Coordinator John Kirby has said. No change in our policy. The president gave instructions to Ukraine a few weeks ago. They can use supplied weapons to strike targets along the border. That remains in place, he told reporters at a briefing. The Russian Defense Ministry said earlier that statements about a deliberate Russian strike on civilian objects in Ukraine were untrue. The destruction was caused by the fall of a Ukrainian air defense missile. It was not the first time Kiev has gone for such provocations. The Russian Defense Ministry stressed that numerous published photos and video footage from Kiev unambiguously confirm the fact of destruction caused by the fall of a Ukrainian air defense missile launched from an anti-aircraft missile system within the city. Earlier, a State Department spokesman said that U.S. President Joe Biden had authorized Ukraine to use US weapons for counter-battery warfare against targets on Russian territory threatening the Kharkiv area, but left in place a ban on the use of ATACMS operational tactical missiles and other long-range weapons. U.S. Presidential National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan reported in June that the authorization to use U.S. weapons on Russian territory extends to all areas where Russian troops cross the border into Ukraine, although initially the authorization to attack Russian territories with U.S. weapons was linked only to areas bordering Kharkiv Oblast. Russian President Vladimir Putin said representatives of NATO countries should be aware of what they are playing with when they talk about plans to allow Kiev to strike legitimate targets deep inside Russian territory, with missile systems handed over to the AFU by the West. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov, commenting on Russia's possible response to new strikes on Russian territory, noted that the head of state and the military are aware of this and are taking appropriate countermeasures and preparing for them. Also, the Russian Defense Ministry said that they had become aware of an upcoming provocation, the purpose of which will be new accusations from the West. In particular, said Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Kirillov, our country will try to accuse of using chemical weapons. For this purpose, the U.S. funds in the amount of about $400,000 have even been allocated. They are preparing a chemical operation against Russia. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the United States and Germany, with the cooperation of Ukraine, are preparing to fabricate evidence of Russia's use of chemical weapons. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, head of the Radiation, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces of the Russian Armed Forces, said that the West had already allocated hundreds of thousands of dollars for this purpose. According to him, a special mission is already being prepared to bring charges against Russia. The special mission will allegedly investigate the facts of the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine, allegedly carried out by Russia. Kirillov recalled that the OPCW was controlled by the USA, and the organization had received instructions from its Western curators not to react in any way to Russia's claims that Ukraine had violated the provisions of the convention. One of the so-called independent states is supposed to initiate an investigation and fabricate evidence that Russia used toxic chemicals during the military operation, he pointed out. The Americans have already allocated about $400,000 for this purpose. In addition, the work is being done with the involvement of the British. Thus, the Defense Ministry noted, the U.S. and Great Britain use a similar approach within the framework of the promoted mechanism of scientific and technological assessment, an international mechanism of cooperation and assistance, which will allow them to form an expert opinion on threats to biosecurity in their own interests. To do this, it is planned to create leveraged channels of influence on international policy and research structures through grant funding. Translated with DeepL.com free version.